Dad, why are my house keys in some stranger's hand? I asked, my voice shaking in the middle of New Year's Eve, just as I stepped into the house I'd spent 8 years saving up to fix. My dad only laughed, lifting his glass in a room flooded with lights. Because from now on, that house isn't yours anymore. And my little sister Ava actually clapped, her smile brighter than the whole string of decorations behind her. We already sold it, sis. Closed the deal last week. Happy New Year. The whole room, relatives, my dad's drinking buddies, and Ava's influencer friends, all turned to look at me like I was the punchline they'd been waiting for all night. They had no idea. I had just come back from waves taller than a 5-story building after 6 months rescuing people in violent offshore storms. And the very first thing I was greeted with wasn't a hug, but the news that my own family had sold everything that belonged to me. Hi everyone. Today I want to tell you a story I never imagined would happen in my life. A story that starts with a homecoming, one that should have been warm and comforting but instead became the biggest shock of all the years I spent saving lives at sea. If you've ever believed that family is always the safest place, maybe after hearing this, you'll rethink that belief. My name is Harper Lane. I had just finished half a year battling waves over 50 feet high off the Whitecrest coast during rescue missions. On New Year's Eve, I stepped off the last late-night bus at 11:07 p.m. The final shuttle still running, then rode another 40 minutes through the darkness back to Riverbend, the small town where I was born. The porch light was still on. The front door hung slightly open, as if someone had walked in and forgotten to close it. From inside came lively music, voices overlapping, and the warm glow of golden lights spilling into the bitter cold outside. In the middle of the living room, beneath sparkling New Year decorations, my dad and my youngest sister stood with glasses of champagne, raised, their faces glowing as if they had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Dad spoke first, his voice loud enough to drown out the speakers. "Welcome home." "But you don't have a home to come back to anymore." I froze. Ava, my sister, clinked her glass, her eyes shining with smug delight. "We sold it, sis. Sold it last week. Happy New Year." The room fell silent. Relatives, my dad's drinking buddies, and Ava's influencer friends all turned to stare at me as if I were the grand finale they had been waiting to watch all night long. I dropped my duffel bag onto the floor with a heavy thud that made the whole room flinch. Brushing off the snow clinging to my shoulders, I lifted my head, letting a slow smile pull at the corner of my mouth, the kind of smile that could make anyone's spine go cold. "That house you two were so excited to sell," I said, my voice calm but razor sharp. "You might want to double-check whose name is still on the deed." I didn't need to say another word. The panic on their faces told the entire story. Anyone who's ever been betrayed by their own family on the one day that's supposed to feel warmest would understand exactly what was running through me. And if you've lived through something similar, feel free to share it in the comments. I read everything. Who knows, the next story I tell might be yours. That night at our rescue base on Stormbreaker Island, the wind cut down to nearly 40 degrees below zero, carrying icy spray that stung like needles. Blink too slowly, and your eyelashes would freeze together. I had just come off a 12-hour shift, my wetsuit still crusted with sea salt. I dragged myself back to the crew quarters, peeled off each heavy layer, and opened FaceTime, the only thing that reminded me I was still human out there in the endless dark of the open ocean. Dad picked up on the third ring. He was sitting in the living room right on the sofa I had worked an entire first year to buy for the family. Behind him, Ava was holding up a brand new designer bag, turning it from side to side like she was showing off a trophy. "Look sis, I just got this today," she squealed, sounding exactly like those luxury unboxing videos I scroll past the second they appear. 2 nights later, she appeared on my screen again. This time, Ava was wearing knee-high designer boots and a luxury fur coat, the kind I knew cost more than my entire monthly hazard pay allowance. Dad sat behind her holding a mug of coffee, wearing that same tired, apologetic smile he always used whenever Ava begged for something new growing up. "She's trying to build her own channel," he said. "Girls these days have to invest in their image." "You wouldn't get it, Harper." I didn't argue. I just stared at the screen until the call ended on its own. A few weeks later, I was sitting inside the helicopter hangar, my legs still strapped in heavy rescue boots, resting them on a tool crate to ease the ache. I pulled out my phone, wanting to check how much the only house I owned had appreciated. It was a small routine, something that brought me a tiny sense of peace during the few quiet minutes between rescue shifts. But this time, when I typed the address into the search bar, something stopped my heart cold. My house appeared with a freshly painted exterior, a spotless front yard, and even staged interior photos. And beneath them a line so clear and bold it felt like it cracked the screen: pending deposit, accepting high offers. I froze. For a few seconds it felt like the entire world went silent. The listing price was far above the military housing loan I had used to buy that home nearly 8 years earlier, an amount that had taken me years to chip away at. My pulse simply stopped. I zoomed in on the realtor's photo. The name was unmistakable: Dylan Hayes, the same guy who used to play pool with my dad years ago, the one who'd recently reinvented himself as a real estate agent. I called my dad 5 times in a row. Every call went straight to voicemail. I texted Ava. The message showed seen, but she didn't respond. Not a single word. That night I sat on the edge of my metal bunk until the lights in the crew quarters went out, replaying every conversation from the last 6 months. All the times Dad said, "Don't worry, everything at home is fine." All the times he asked, "Could you send Ava a little extra this month?" And all the times he dodged my questions whenever I asked what Ava was really doing with her life. It all echoed in my head, over and over, until the truth became impossible to ignore. I opened my messaging app and scrolled up until I found Lana Chen, a friend from my old water rescue training program, now a legal officer in the military. We hadn't talked in over 2 years, but I'd never deleted her number. I sent her the listing link along with one question: "Hey, in the U.S., can someone with power of attorney sell the only house registered under an active duty service member while that service member is deployed?" Not even 30 seconds passed before she replied, "Send me the exact address and a scan of the power of attorney form. I'll pull records in the morning. And Harper, freeze every one of your credit files right now." For the next 4 hours, I sat beside my satellite phone as it flickered in and out of signal, screenshotting every message where Dad asked me to help Ava a little, every transfer labeled family, and every email where I'd signed the long-term authorization papers before deploying because I trusted Dad to handle nothing more than the utility bills. Around 5 in the morning Island time, Lana sent the first PDF. It was a property record extract showing a secondary mortgage loan opened under my name worth nearly $3.5 million. The signature in the authorized representative section belonged to my father, and the funds had been wired into an account whose last 4 digits matched Ava's bank card. 2 hours later, the second file came through. This time it was a preliminary sale agreement. The registered buyers were Anna and Kyle, Ava's 2 best friends from high school. One glance was enough. I knew instantly I had been dragged into the kind of dirty scheme I had only ever seen in online cautionary tales. And unfortunately, this time I was the main character. Anna, Ava's old high school bestie, had signed the contract 12 days earlier. No bank appraisal, no title search, no occupancy verification from the legal homeowner. Everything about it was an off-the-books illegal deal. Lana's final message popped up, written entirely in caps. "They can't legally transfer the title, but they're moving fast because they think no one's watching. Start saving everything." I immediately created a new encrypted folder on my hard drive and labeled it Assets. I dumped in every file, every screenshot, every bank alert, protected it with a password only I knew. Then I sat down on the cold concrete floor of the crew quarters, staring at the metal wall in front of me, feeling the last thread tying me to that house. Snap. I was done being patient. While I stood watch on the deck of the rescue ship, the wind howling so violently that maintenance crews had to chain down every helicopter, Lana kept sending document after document. Each file hit me like a punch to the chest. The first page was a bank statement, a withdrawal record from the secondary mortgage taken out under my name, showing 3 transfers into Ava's account within 4 days. The second page was an email from Dylan Hayes to my father, dated exactly 1 week after the loan had been activated. "Title is clear for a fast cash sale. We can close in 12 days. No bank needed. No problem." The third page, the sales contract. Signed, not by the legal homeowner, but by my father acting as me. Sale price nearly $500,000. Deposit more than $100,000 marked clearly as non-refundable. Buyers Anna and Kyle, Ava's old cheer squad friends, the same couple whose wedding she attended last summer. In the PDF, Lana had attached a note: "No bank would ever approve this, no title insurance company would touch a file with an active mortgage, and no occupancy verification. But they're betting on you being stuck out at sea, so they're pushing their luck." I gathered every document, and sent them to my commander along with an urgent leave request. The family hardship paperwork was approved in 6 hours. I booked the last seat available on the final transport off Stormbreaker Island, catching a red-eye that connected through Reagan National Airport, waiting 4 hours in the military lounge before flying on to Los Angeles, then taking another connection to Seattle. From the moment I left the island to the moment my boots hit the floor of Reagan Airport, it had been 21 hours. I hadn't slept for even 90 minutes. The entire way there, I stared at the contract on my tablet, reading it again and again until every word felt burned into my mind. At the rental counter, there was only one vehicle left, a silver pickup with studded tires. I tossed my duffel into the truck bed, punched Riverbend into the GPS, and drove straight into a storm of thick, blinding snow, my heart pounding like a stone with every mile. Halfway across New Year's Pass, the sky opened up. Sheets of rain slammed sideways against the windshield, and gusts of wind hit hard enough to rock the truck. The warning sign for icy roads, reduce speed, flashed red over and over, but there wasn't a single plow truck in sight. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, fingers going numb from the cold eyes locked on each reflector post along the roadside. Every mile that slipped under my tires felt like I was closing in on the disaster I feared most. When the slope leveled out, Lake Blackwater appeared to my right, its dark surface reflecting the New Year lights of the houses along the shore. Beautiful, but eerie. A picture-perfect omen of something terribly wrong. I turned onto Northwest Boulevard in Riverbend, then onto the quiet street where my house stood. And I swear not even the nights I'd dangled above raging ocean waves had ever clenched my stomach as tightly as this moment did. The whole neighborhood was glowing in New Year's cheer, every house strung with LED lights, door banners, music blasting so loud it spilled right onto the street. But my house was different. It was lit up like a brand new furniture showroom. Every light upstairs and downstairs was on. Both garage doors were covered in red and gold wreaths. Twinkling lights wrapped the railings from end to end. Shadows moved back and forth behind the curtains. And the music thumped so hard I could hear it clearly even from inside my truck. I parked 2 houses down, killed the engine, and sat in the sudden silence watching steam rise from the hood into the cold, rainy New Year's night. The dashboard clock read 11:11 p.m. The bass from my house kept pounding strong enough to rattle my truck windows. I pulled on my jacket, grabbed the folder of documents I'd prepared over the entire journey from Stormbreaker Island, and pushed open the door. Rain soaked my ankles, mud splashing onto my boots, but I walked straight toward the porch without slowing. Of course, no one came to open the door. They were too busy celebrating New Year's inside the very house I had drained myself to buy. I walked up the brick path, the same one I had cleaned and repaired with my own hands for 8 years. Under the porch light, the one I installed after my first promotion, I stared at the bright red holiday wreath hanging exactly where my American flag used to fly. I reached out, grabbed the doorknob, twisted it, and shoved it open. Using my shoulder, I pushed hard and stepped straight into the middle of their party. A wave of scents hit me, incense, festival food, and the sour edge of cheap wine hanging thick in the air. In the center of the living room stood a massive New Year display, white LED lights wrapped around glittering gold streamers like a stage set for some gaudy performance. Inside were no fewer than 30 people, distant relatives. I barely remembered my dad's old drinking buddies and Ava's influencer crowd, all holding plastic cups of wine like they were attending a wedding. My dad was the first to notice me. He stood right beneath the giant holiday display, wearing a ridiculous light-up sweater, one arm wrapped around Ava's shoulder and the other raising a plastic cup high in the air. The music was blasting, but he still shouted loud enough to cut through it like he'd been waiting all year to deliver this line. "Look who finally decided to show up. Too bad you're late. This house isn't yours anymore." Ava spun around instantly. Her custom sequin-covered dress, probably from some designer she couldn't pronounce, sparkled under the lights, each stitch sharp enough to blind someone. Her extensions swayed with the dramatic flip of her head. She clapped her hands, thrilled with herself. "We finished the transfer yesterday, sis. Paid in cash, too. We're celebrating right here in your old house." The whole room burst into laughter, as if this were the highlight performance of the entire New Year's celebration. I stood in the doorway, rain dripping from my jacket onto the hardwood floor I had paid to restore plank by plank 3 years earlier. My heartbeat stayed steady, the same steady rhythm I felt when I hung over the side of a rescue ship in pitch-black seas, with the wind slicing across my face. Dad raised his voice even louder, the alcohol, making him bolder now that he had an audience. Family looks out for each other, sweetheart. Ava needs a fresh start. And you're gone all the time playing hero out on the ocean. I figured you wouldn't notice. I spoke softly, but my tone was cold enough to cut through the music, which seemed to drop a beat at the same moment. You sure about that, Dad? He laughed, assuming he had me cornered, convinced I had no way out. I pulled out my phone, opened the PDF Lana had sent from the county records office, and turned the screen so everyone could see the highlighted section. The secondary mortgage worth nearly $3.5 million is under my name. And you signed for it using power of attorney. That loan is active and holds first priority on the title. No title insurance company will complete a sale with an undisclosed lien. I paused, letting the weight of the words settle. That means your little transfer will never go through. Anna and Kyle, Ava's high school best friends and the buyers on the contract, sat frozen on the leather couch I had bought after my first promotion. Anna's wine glass slipped from her hand, hit the table and shattered. Kyle's face went ashen. He shot to his feet so fast he knocked over the ottoman in front of him. The room sank into a suffocating heavy silence. Kyle pointed at my father, his voice shaking with anger and panic. You told us the power of attorney was legit. You said this was an internal sale, no bank, no appraisal needed. My dad's wine cup slipped from his hand and cracked against the floor. Red wine bled into the rug I bought with my very first paycheck, spreading like a dark stain. Ava finally found her voice, shrill and frightened. This is insane. We already gave Dylan the deposit, over $100,000, and it's non-refundable. There it was. That name. Dylan Hayes. My dad's longtime chess buddy, the man who called himself a real estate expert. I looked straight at Ava, each word sharp as a blade. Dylan Hayes, the guy who had his real estate license revoked twice for skipping title checks. That guy. The one who drafted your contract without a single verification from a bank or an appraisal office. Anna burst into tears, burying her face in Kyle's shoulder. One of my dad's poker friends muttered under his breath, "Oh, we're screwed." And he slowly backed toward the hallway like he didn't want to be caught in the fallout. I took another step forward, leaving a trail of wet footprints across the hardwood. Let me make this real simple, I said, pointing around the room, frozen in shock. You're throwing a party in a house that legally still belongs to me. The buyers just handed over more than $100,000 to a broker who can't legally close the deal. And the bank holding the secondary mortgage under my name is about to discover that someone tried to secretly sell the property they're using as collateral. My dad opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I looked at Ava one last time, my eyes so cold she actually stepped back. I hope your fresh start is worth it, because this will be the last time you ever set foot in my house. The holiday lights flickered relentlessly bright and merciless, illuminating every terrified face in the room. I turned and walked out of the house that had once meant everything to me. I didn't look back. I got in the truck and drove straight to the Blackwater Lake Plaza just to clear my head. By 9 the next morning, I was sitting at a window table in a lakeside cafe, watching gray patches ripple across the water as the weather shifted colder. I opened my briefcase, laid out every document, and prepared for the biggest legal fight of my life. On the table in front of me were 3 thick folders marked with dozens of sticky tabs, highlighted lines, notes in the margins, the kind of evidence you'd expect in a major courtroom battle. Anna and Kyle walked into the cafe, looking like they hadn't slept since New Year's Eve. Anna's eyes were swollen, and Kyle's jaw was clenched so tightly it looked like it had been locked in place for 2 days. They sat across from me, staring silently at the stack of documents piled on the table. I slid the first folder toward them. Everything is in here, I said, my voice calm and steady, the same tone I used when reporting flight paths to helicopter pilots. All documents from the county records office. Every bank transfer. Every message between my father and Dylan Hayes where they tried to hide the entire deal. Every lie. Kyle opened the folder with trembling hands. Anna leaned over, flipping through the pages upside down. The moment she saw the confirmation for the non-refundable 6-figure deposit, she broke into tears again, mascara streaking down her cheeks. I continued, my voice low, even, and sharp under U.S. real estate law. Anyone who knowingly participates in an illegal transaction is personally liable. Civil law also states that anyone who abuses power of attorney is responsible for full restitution. I looked directly at them. If you file today, your deposit will be refunded. You'll get compensation for damages. Attorney fees covered. You may even be granted additional penalties. I'll sign every document, I'll write the affidavit, I'll testify in court, and I'll stand with you all the way. Kyle looked up, his eyes bloodshot. You really want to take your own dad to court? I looked him straight in the eye. He stopped being my dad the day he treated my hard-earned life as a cash machine he could empty whenever he felt like it. This isn't revenge. This is cleaning up the damage. Anna wiped her tears with a tissue, leaving a dark streak of mascara across her cheek. We already moved half our stuff into the house. He gave us the garage code, told us to just treat it like ours. I nodded once. Then you have even more grounds to sue for fraud. Keep every photo, every text, every moving receipt. All of it goes into the case file. Kyle pulled out his phone, dialed their attorney, and put it on speaker right on the table, the smell of fresh coffee rising between us. I sat with them for nearly an hour and a half, walking through every timeline, every detail, step by step. By the time we stood up to leave the cafe, the attorney on the other end of the call had already begun drafting a civil lawsuit against 3 people, my father Ava and Dylan Hayes, for fraud, abuse of power of attorney, and violations of U.S. real estate transaction laws. The legal battle officially started at that moment. I had only made it halfway across the parking lot when my phone lit up with a call from Mrs. Hollins, my old neighbor. Her voice was urgent. Harper, your father's sitting in his truck outside my gate. He's been there for an hour. The bank just sent a foreclosure notice, and Anna and Kyle's attorney left a message demanding damages in the 6 figures. He says he won't leave until he sees you. I drove back in silence only a few blocks away. And just like Mrs. Hollins said, my dad was slumped behind the wheel of his old pickup, clutching a rain-soaked envelope in both hands. Mrs. Hollins stood on her porch in a thin coat, arms folded, giving me the same look she used to give when I'd come home late from school. I walked up to the driver's side. Dad shakily lowered the window. The envelope in his hand was drenched from the rain. He spoke softly like someone who had lost everything. They took it all. The rental place on 3rd Street, my tools, even the lawnmower. They gave me 1 month to clear out. I stood there saying nothing. He tried to push the truck door open, but his hands were shaking so badly he couldn't muster the strength. His voice cracked. I never thought it would end like this. I just wanted to help Ava. I thought you'd understand. I leaned down so he had no choice but to meet my eyes. You thought wrong. Tears slipped down his cheeks, soaking the collar of his worn-out shirt. He pleaded, Harper, can't you tell them to stop? I'll sign anything you want. I'll give you the rental place. Just save me this one time. I straightened my voice sharp enough to cut through the rain. You have nothing left to offer me. I don't need a house, I don't need an apology, I don't need anything from you. He reached out, trying to grab my sleeve. I stepped back. Don't call me again. Don't come to my place. Don't send anyone with messages. That New Year's Eve was your choice. Now you live with it. I turned away, leaving him slumped over the steering wheel. The rain grew heavier, long streaks sliding down his windshield with no one there to wipe them away. I handed the garage door remote back to the new homeowner, then drove straight to the county courthouse to file the paperwork, relinquishing the title. The clerk flipped through the file and stamped the confirmation at 2:17 in the afternoon. By 2:45, the bank had already filed a freeze order on the only rental property my father still had on 3rd Street. The path he chose had finally closed on him. 2 days later, his attorney filed for personal bankruptcy at the Riverbend County Court. From that moment on, everything he owned was seized. His small rental unit on 3rd Street, his old 2014 pickup, the tools in his shed, even the lawnmower he loved more than half the people in his life. The meeting with the Asset Management Board lasted barely 12 minutes. When he walked out of the courthouse, all he had left was a plastic bag with a few changes of clothes and the order clearing him of all debts except for his minimal retirement stipend and that beat-up truck the board decided wasn't worth taking. Meanwhile, Dylan Hayes' disciplinary hearing was scheduled for the following month at the State Board of Real Estate Licensing. I took 2 days off and drove 5 hours to sit quietly in the back row of the hearing room. The committee's attorney read every violation one by one: failure to run a title check, no bank appraisal, deliberate concealment of an active secondary mortgage, and no occupancy verification from the legal homeowner. Dylan tried to defend himself, claiming he was just the middleman, but his excuses didn't last 4 minutes. The board revoked his real estate license on the spot immediately and without the possibility of appeal. He shuffled out through the side exit under the glare of news cameras, while I simply walked back to my car and drove home without even the faintest smile. Vi's downfall came slowly then, all at once and brutally. It started with the international credit card debts piling up at the courthouse, first the equivalent of nearly $50,000, then $20,000, then just over $3,000, and finally, the $6,000 private tuition loan she had been hiding. Each judgment carried a post-hearing interest rate of 23% plus attorney fees. The moment a wage garnishment order hit her employer, all her part-time sponsorships were canceled without hesitation. Someone took screenshots of every public court filing and posted them in a local Expose Your Influencer community group. Within a week, Vi had lost half her followers. She began selling her belongings piece by piece, her ring lights, backdrop stands, camera mounts, even the fake plants. All of it listed online for prices so low they might as well have been giveaways. I received the house keys back on a gray Thursday morning in March. The house was silent. The power had been cut, the water heater shut down, and the pipes drained in case of a cold snap. I pushed the door open and let the quiet swallow me. In the corner of the living room stood the only surviving remnant of that disastrous party, the New Year's display. Strips of tinsel lay scattered on the floor, broken LED lights dangled from the frame, and the colored paper hung, wrinkled and torn, as if someone had ripped it down during a rage-filled moment. I walked upstairs. Only my mother's glass cabinet remained untouched. Inside sat her small wooden ring box, the wedding band she left behind, the photo of the three of us taken the day I earned my promotion, and the badge she used to pin to her blouse on ceremonial days. I opened the cabinet, lifted each item carefully, and placed them into a soft-lined pouch before closing the door again. Everything else I left exactly where it was. That Friday morning I met Teresa, a real estate agent Mrs. Hollins had recommended from the county title office. I signed a 6-month exclusive listing contract with her 3% commission and priced the house just a few $1,000s below the nearest comparable property to guarantee strong interest. The listing hadn't even been up long enough to install the lockbox before offers started rolling in. 7 buyers went over asking price and wanted to close in cash. I chose the cleanest offer, 30-day payment, no appraisal, no contingencies. Closing day was clear and bright. The buyers were a young Navy couple who had just transferred from the southern coast. They walked through the house one last time while I stood on the front lawn beside 3 cardboard boxes, my uniforms, my mom's belongings, and a glass display case holding my service medals. The husband asked if I wanted to keep the flagpole in the yard. I told him it was theirs now. He thanked me for my years of service. I just nodded, handed them the entire set of keys already clipped onto a new ring, and signed the final papers. No moving truck showed up. I'd hired an estate liquidation service to sell everything left in the house. The sofa I bought after my first deployment, the dining table I refinished by hand, every glass, every pillow. They tagged and staged it all for the weekend sale and sent me a check for $12,000 after fees. I endorsed it straight to the Coast Guard Relief Fund that same day. I set the 3 boxes in the back seat of my new pickup, shut the door, and pulled away from the curb. The house grew smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror until the bend along Blackwater Lake swallowed it completely. I didn't feel sad. I just felt lighter. That same week I signed a lease for a small 3rd-floor apartment in an old brick building. 1-bedroom, exposed walls, and east-facing window overlooking the water sunrise poured in every morning. No garage, no yard, no memories clinging to the structure. Just me and the stillness of the lake. The court issued a civil protective order after my father drove to my building twice within 7 days, and Ava created 3 new phone numbers to send long voice messages accusing me of owing them. The order was clear: a 500-meter no-contact radius for 2 years violation subject to criminal charges. I framed the certified copy in black and hung it above my desk like a diploma I had truly worked for. In June, Lana came to town for a 3-day maritime security conference at a lakeside resort. She dropped her overnight bag right in the middle of my living room and immediately claimed the longest couch. That evening we sat on the narrow balcony, feet propped on the railing, watching the last seaplanes of the day glide across the mirror-still lake before disappearing toward the mountains. Later that night she returned from the lobby holding a certified mail envelope between 2 fingers as if it might explode. The security guard had signed for it. Printed in the corner, Creston County Detention Center. The handwriting my father's was thinner, shakier, ink bleeding in several spots, as if his hand trembled the entire time he wrote it. I took the envelope to the kitchen, set it on the cold stone counter, then lit the fireplace even though the apartment was already warm. Using the survival knife I carried on field assignments, I slit the envelope open. Inside were 5 sheets of jailhouse stationery, blue-lined the pencil pressed so hard it tore the paper. The first line read, "I know you don't want anything from me anymore. I don't blame you. I'm facing an 18-month sentence for fraud. They seized the house, the tools, even your mother's porcelain cabinet." I made it to the 10th line before I stopped. The words felt tight in my throat, but my hands stayed steady as I folded the entire stack of pages in half. Then I walked to the fireplace and dropped them into the flames. The paper caught instantly, curling at the edges, turning black, then crumbling into thin ash that drifted upward through the chimney as if it had never existed at all. The next morning, I walked into a telecom store on Henderson Avenue, stood at the counter, and watched the clerk press the button that permanently canceled my old hometown number, the number my relatives had used for years as a leash. New SIM, new carrier, new area code. 757, far enough down the coast that no one could guess where I'd gone. I deleted every shared photo album, erased every family group chat, removed every tagged picture from high school. I blocked every number I still remembered, including the jail's desk phone, the one my father had used to call me. In the agency's personnel system, I changed my emergency contact to Major Lena Tran, United States Coast Guard Command. While I was at it, I updated the beneficiary on my line of duty death insurance as well. When the screen flashed a green confirmation, "Update successful," I stood in the middle of my apartment, closed my eyes, and listened. No more buzzing phone. No more demanding messages, no more guilt, no more begging, no invisible cord pulling me back to people who only ever took and never gave anything in return. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. That evening, Hannah rolled in from the bus terminal, grabbed a rideshare, and showed up at my door with a duffel bag and 2 bottles of whiskey. The next morning, Nate, Kira, and Doc dragged themselves in after an all-night drive from Hawthorne Air Station, still in their duty uniforms, because their shift had ended at 4 a.m. 5 people, 1 tiny couch the size of a dorm bed, 2 air mattresses, and a kitchen smaller than a closet. Perfect. We cooked like we used to on rescue ships. Nate grilled outside on the balcony, even with the wind chill dropping to 8 degrees below zero, flipping cuts of meat so thick they'd make a Texas pitmaster jealous. Kira took over my kitchen and turned leftover rice kimchi and a few slices of canned meat into something warm and fragrant, the kind of food that makes everyone feel like they've gone home again. Doc made hot cocoa and dumped in so much peppermint whiskey that we had to throw the windows open to cool the place down. We ate on our feet plates resting on the counter, wet boots dripping onto the tile. We took turns telling stories, the times we'd pulled survivors out of waves as tall as 5-story buildings, and the ones who almost didn't make it. No one mentioned the year before. No one had to. When the dishes were washed and the fire burned bright in the hearth, I pulled a small flat piece of titanium from my jacket pocket, cut from the tail section of a rescue helicopter that had taken a lightning strike during a mission off Storm Point. A scorched, ice-cold scrap of metal, but proof of everything we had survived and come home from. And that night, in that tiny apartment tucked against the lake, for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally living for myself. I'd spent 3 nights in the garage working with nothing but a hand file and a small grinder, shaping that metal into a 5-pointed star, the edges still rough, still holding the heat of everything it had been through. That night, I climbed onto the coffee table and reached up to place the star on top of the small Christmas tree I'd bought from a roadside market. The white lights hit the metal and scattered into 1,000 tiny reflections that danced across the walls like ripples on water. Lana, my closest friend through all those years of duty, lifted her mug of cocoa reheated by someone just moments earlier. She said a single line, simple but heavy as stone, pressing against my chest. "To the ones who stay when things get hard." We clinked our mugs softly. No cheering, no toasts, just a quiet drink shared between people who understood. Later that night, when everyone had fallen asleep in a tangle of blankets on the floor, and the fire had burned down to a few fading embers, I stood by the window, hands wrapped around a mug of hot coffee. Outside, a thin, cold wind swept across the lakeside path, erasing every footprint. The water was dark and bottomless, a mirror reflecting the distant tree line, where only a few lonely porch lights glowed from homes belonging to people I would never know. I found myself thinking about the old house on the lakeshore, the one with the big window facing the water, the one with the flagpole I would never raise a flag on again. I thought about the tall evergreen tree twice my height that I had shipped home every New Year's so they could decorate it the same corner where the couch sits now. I thought about the voices that once filled that house so loudly it became suffocating, and realized that silence felt better than all of them combined. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Blood doesn't guarantee honesty. Blood doesn't guarantee love. Blood only proves shared ancestry. Everything else is a choice. And for the first time in my life, I understood that the people sleeping on my floor tonight had chosen me. Chosen me, even when it cost them something. Time, money, their rare days off the warmth of their own beds, choosing to drive for hours through winter roads just to sit on my old balcony, eating overcooked steak because I asked them to. That is what family really is. The metal star caught the firelight one last time as the logs in the fireplace cracked and collapsed into ash. And I stood there feeling weightless, as if I had finally shrugged off decades of heaviness I'd carried on my shoulders. Before I end today's story, there's one thing I want to say. Thank you for staying with me until the very last moment. Life doesn't always give us what we hope for, but it always gives us a chance to start again. And if you too are walking through days as exhausting as the ones I once survived, I hope you'll be strong enough to leave the places that hurt you, and gentle enough with yourself to find a life that's truly worthy of you. I'll see you in the next story. Wishing you a quiet, peaceful day ahead.